Thank you for joining us. I'm Terri Kimball, President and CEO here at the Chandler Chamber, and I am really excited to start off our public policy series. We kicked it off in January with our Meet the Elected Officials and our How We Stand document. There are copies of that on that back table for you, so please make sure that you take that. Those are how we stand on our legislative issues here in Chandler. Public policy is obviously very important to our business community, and that's why we have these events, and these would not be made possible without the help of our sponsors, such as Air Products and Chemicals, Salt River Project, Planet Startup, Dignity Health Chandler Regional Medical Center, Intel, Catalyst Computer Technologies, Southwest Gas, Edward Jones Investments, Terri McKibbin, APS, and Dragon Walk Fine Chinese Restaurant. So let's give them a round of applause. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our 2022 board chair. That's going to be a tongue twister this year, is Mr. Rick Human with CMA.
Sorry. This is a 2/22/22 at 2:22 in the morning or whatever. So anyway, public policy is very close to my heart. I actually chaired this committee for several years, so it's super important. And Terri and our staff do a great job of bringing some great topics to our chamber, which is super important. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, which is Mitzi Epstein. Let me get to the right part here. I want to miss the introduction the right way. So a little change in our setup for this morning. Our next speaker is, hold on. Representative Mitzi Epstein is on the state legislature representing LD18, as well as also computer systems analyst. Representative Epstein has served as owner and operator of custom language training. Additionally, she was elected to the Kyrene Elementary School District Governing Board in 2004. Finally, she has served as vice president and legislative chair of the Arizona Parent Teacher Association. She's currently a member of the House Rules, Ways and Means, and Land and Agricultural Committees in the state legislature. Representative Epstein.
Good morning. So legislature is off and running, and there's our committees that are jam-packed full of bills, and then there's the Ways and Means Committee, and we've heard two so far this year. It just depends on the topic, I guess, but you know, it's always exciting. I always start the legislative session full of optimism. We're going to work together, we're going to collaborate, we're going to get great things done. This year is a little different, I gotta be honest. We've seen a lot more extreme style of bills come up to the committee right away, and we've had some pretty exciting debates so far. But let me tell you, I'm ranking member of Ways and Means, and the House Ways and Means Committee works with revenue, taxes, if you will. And so we've only had two bills come through. Our agenda for next week is a little more full, but in general, we've had a couple of tax carve-outs to find out if they are appropriate. Now, my lens for that is always, does it do a public good? Is there some kind of economic development to be gotten from it? What is the purpose of this carve-out? And so we had one that was for agriculture that said off-highway vehicles should be tax exempt from sales tax. It was a party line vote. The Democrats said no, and the Republicans said yes. I asked for some reports about why is that particular vehicle needed? How does that help economic development? Why is the subsidy needed for agriculture? Because I think that's an important question, even when it seems a little obvious. Of course we love our farms. Of course we need food. Of course we need this industry to thrive in Arizona. But I'd like to see the numbers. So we asked for some reports, and the Farm Bureau is going to give those to us. We had another one, actually 3 other bills on the agenda that day. The sponsor did not even show up to the meeting, and there were no people there to testify for or against it. So I have to tell you, as a legislator, sometimes legislators put bills together that may or may not have actually come from constituents. They were just sort of, the legislator said, I want to do something nice for puppies or for veterans or for somebody. And when you have a committee committee and nobody shows up to talk about it, no stakeholders, let's not bother with that. Let's help them do the bills that our real people are looking to solve problems, because there are a lot of those in the legislature. So I wanted to talk to you about one of the biggest problems we're facing right now for our schools is the aggregate expenditure limit. And this, show of hands, have you heard anybody talk about the aggregate expenditure limit? Yay. So just to be real clear, the schools are within their budgets. They're all spending only the amount of money that the legislature said you can spend. So the legislature last June said, schools, here's your budget, put the money in the bank, and the schools started spending from that money. Then 3/4 of the way through the year, they realized, oh, that amount in the budget was over the constitutional limit. So now stop spending. And that's what will happen if we don't act by March 1st. The money will be there, the schools cannot spend it. So we really need to get that vote, put it up on the board, it's just an accounting action. Let us say, yes, spend the money we already approved for last year's budget. It is that simple, yeah, but it is being held up for a number of reasons. I'll let somebody from the other side of the aisle try to explain that to you. I honestly don't understand it. I think it's just an accounting situation. We need to say, schools, go ahead and spend the money that the legislature put in the budget for you. So that's not supposed to be aggregate expenditure. When we have questions and answers, I think ask away. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the oh, I don't know. You know what? Let me just go into yesterday's floor session. Did kind of leave me feeling a little frustrated with our the way things are going. We have schools trying to ban books, stop people from learning. I think that we need to do it carefully. Both our colleagues across the aisle have concerns about what we're teaching our students. That's very good. But we should work on the words together. We should develop the words to put these guardrails up for schools together, and that's not what happens. What we keep getting is somebody writes the bill, and then we get told vote on it and like it, and that's not the right way to put together legislation. I think there was another one that has to do with cities. So there's a bill floated through that would create a by right development, and the problem with that one is cities like Chandler create plans, big plans of where we want to zone what. And some of those plans are very helpful for neighborhoods to know this is what my neighborhood is going to be like, businesses to know this is what I can expect from traffic. But this bill would allow developers to come in, and if they met a checklist, they could go ahead and do the development. It would speed up permitting, which is great. Speeding up permitting is a good idea, but this could allow the master plan to be violated. And the master plan, of course, is voted on by voters, so we really don't want to have that happen. This is the kind of thing where the intention to help development, permitting is a good intention. It needs some serious work to make sure that we don't override master plans in cities. So we're hopeful that we can pull back on that and make sure that we are allowing cities and the people in them, businesses, the neighborhoods, to have a voice in what their cities look like. So that is this by right development bill that you will hear a little bit about later in the year. And that is about all I have for an update. So I'm going to pass it back to Luke.
Quick comment. Some of the legislature talking about bills, and one of the things the chamber does, we have a document called Where We Stand, and we will weigh in on issues that affect the business community as well as affect the city. We're not just an organization that looks at it just one way. If something's going to affect the city of Chandler, and over the years we've had to weigh in on bills that other chambers have not appreciated that how we weigh in, but it's super important that we're very local and supportive of certain things and stuff. So the next person we're going to be hearing from will be a message from Senator Bowie, who represents also LD18. LD18, for the people who don't know, it's basically from the 101 west, covers West Chandler, covers parts of Tempe, parts of Mesa, and parts of Phoenix as well and stuff. So Senator Bowie received his degree from ASU, Go Devils, in political science and history. In November 2016, Sean was elected to Arizona's legislature to represent District 18. After his election, Bowie became a sitting member on the Appropriations Committee, the Commerce Committee, and Finance Committee. In addition to his role in the Senate, Senator Bowie also works as professor of practice at the School of Public Affairs at ASU. He teaches undergraduate courses on leadership, ethics, public policy, and state legislature, which is why he will be unable to be with us today. Please turn your attention to the screen for a special message from Senator Bowie.
Hi everyone, Sean Bowie here, State Senator for Legislative District 18. I'm so sorry that I can't join you today in person. One thing you might not know about me is I started an executive MBA program last fall at the WP Terri School at ASU, and one Friday every month I had to be in class all day. So that day was today. It's also why I missed the elected officials breakfast last month. So I'm sorry I can't be with you today, and I hope I can see all of you in person soon. It's week 4 here at the Capitol. We're obviously very busy with bills that are being introduced and debated and voted on. You've probably heard about some in the media and this morning. So I just want to go over a few things that are high priority, some issues related to the city of Chandler that are important, and some of my bills that I'm working on, some of my budget priorities this session. So there are 2 issues that are of really critical importance for us here at the state level that are going to require bipartisanship in order to get them done, that are going to impact the city of Chandler. One is something called the aggregate expenditure limit, and it's a spending cap that was approved by the voters back in the 1980s. And every so often we have to vote to override that cap. This year it's about $1.2 billion of funding that was already approved by the legislature last year. But if we don't vote to raise that cap by March 1st, our local school districts, it adds up to $1.2 billion that they cannot spend, which would mean the schools having to close, teachers being laid off, and obviously we don't want that. It would have a really significant impact on our community, Chandler Unified. The impact would be over $50 million. The Kyrene School District, about $17 million. Tempe Union, another $17 million. So that's over $80 million of state funding that our local school districts would lose if we don't vote to raise the cap. So I am very supportive of raising that cap, and I'm doing all I can to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we do that by March 1st. The other issue that's going to require bipartisanship and is really important to the city of Chandler is the extension of Prop 400, which is an existing sales tax that everyone in Maricopa County pays when they purchase things. They pay a sales tax, and those dollars have been used over the last 20, 25 years to fund every infrastructure project you can think of in Maricopa County. Loop 202 extension through South Mountain, the 101, local roads, and other infrastructure projects. All of those things have been funded. That tax is set to expire in 2025, so we have to pass a bill to allow Maricopa County to go back to the voters and ask them, do you want to continue this tax? It's not a tax increase. It's just an extension of what's already in place for another 25 years. So very important that we do that. Chandler's growth over the last several decades has been in part because of those investments that we've made in infrastructure and roads and freeways. So I am also very supportive of extending that and allowing Maricopa County voters the option, if they want to extend that tax for another 25 years. A couple other issues I want to touch on. We passed a bill earlier this week that I know was important to the Chandler Chamber. It was Senate Bill 1092, and it had to do with product liability for small businesses. I know this was important to a lot of you. I voted yes on this bill. The bill is now heading over to the House. So I'm hoping we can get that done this year to provide a little more assurance and stability for our small business community here in Chandler. A couple of other issues that we're dealing with. One that we deal with every year is short-term rentals. I know that's becoming more and more of an issue here in Chandler. We've got several bills this year that would seek to restore more autonomy to our cities to regulate short-term rentals. We currently have a statewide preemption over cities doing much of anything in terms of regulating short-term rentals. So I've always been very supportive of giving more autonomy back to the cities, because it's an issue that obviously impacts cities differently depending on where you are. So it's becoming more of an issue in West Chandler and downtown Chandler. And my hope is we can pass legislation this year to help our cities and local law enforcement extensions if need be on short-term rentals. Another issue that I've heard from the city about and from constituents in Chandler is fireworks. After 4th of July and New Year's Day every year, especially people with kids or with pets. Obviously, there's a lot of people setting off fireworks and a lot of people are doing that not in accordance with the state law. So we passed a bill out of the Commerce Committee over this week. It's Senate Bill 1275, if you want to look it up. That would restore more autonomy back to our cities and the local law enforcement. It restricts the amount of time that people can set off fireworks. So my hope is we can get that passed this year to allow Chandler police and other local law enforcement, give them the tools they need to hold the bad actors accountable and hopefully not have as many fireworks going off at 3 o'clock in the morning. Next issue is affordable housing. I think I touched on this a little bit in discussing short-term rentals. A lot of the affordable housing policies are set at the city level. And cities like Tempe and Mesa and some of the neighboring cities have done a lot of work on this. There are things we can do at the state level to be helpful. Last year, we passed an affordable housing tax credit to put this tax credit in place to allow developers access to that if they met certain criteria, so we can get more affordable housing projects built. We also have something called the Housing Trust Fund, which is something that we used to fund at the state level. And I've been very supportive over the years of putting dollars in those funds that are administered by the Department of Housing to invest in affordable housing projects throughout the state. It's really critically important that we do that. People want to move to Arizona, they want to move to Chandler. It's important that we have affordable housing options for them when they do want to move here. Another big issue that we deal with every year, but especially this year, is voting rights and protecting voting rights. There have been a lot of bills introduced and attacks over the years going after the early voting list, going after voting by mail, things that I'm very opposed to. I don't want to make it harder for Chandler residents to vote. We have a bill in particular this year that would prevent cities from doing all vote by mail elections. What you usually see in off-year elections like school bond and override elections, city elections, it's far cheaper for cities to do all vote by mail elections. And people like it. Almost 90% of my constituents vote by mail in every election. So I would not be supportive of efforts to do away with that and preempt cities in terms of how they run their elections. A couple of things that I'm working on. I have a bill that I've introduced that I'm excited about that I hope to get through the process this year. It's Senate Bill 1018. It would create what's called an earned income tax credit. You may be familiar with the federal earned income tax credit. 30 states have a state version of the EITC. We're hoping to become the 31st. This would be a direct tax cut for low income working families. They have to be working. They have to meet certain eligibility requirements. The more kids they have, the size of the benefit increases. The earned income tax credit is one of the most effective anti-poverty measures this country has ever done. It was President Ronald Reagan who first came up with the idea in the mid-1980s. And my hope is we can pass a state version here in Arizona this year. It was such a good idea that the governor stole it from me. And it's in the governor's executive budget proposal this year. So it's got bipartisan support. My bill passed out of the Senate Finance Committee last week with bipartisan support. So my hope is we can get that across the finish line and we can create that tax credit. It would cost about $75 million a year. And it would really help a lot of low-income working families, not just here in Chandler, but across the state as well. Last thing, as far as budget priorities, obviously for me, additional investment in our K-12 schools and higher education are always going to be at the top of the list. Investing in our community colleges like Chandler Gilbert and Mesa Community Colleges, showing the great work that ASU and other state universities have done with their medical school, with the engineering school. Those are all really critically important investments. We want to grow our economy and attract good paying jobs here in the Valley and in the city of Chandler. Investing in infrastructure is important as well. We've got a plan to widen the I-10 between Phoenix and Casa Grande. Anyone who has had to drive the I-10 between Phoenix and Casa Grande is 2 lanes in both directions. A lot of delays, especially if there's an accident. So I really hope that we can make that investment this year to speed that up and expand the I-10 between Phoenix and Casa Grande. I think that's going to have a really positive impact on the city of Chandler as well. So the budget is a several-month process. Last year, we were here until the end of June. My hope is we'll be done sooner than that this year, but stay tuned as we debate the particulars of the budget and things that can be included in there. So that's it for my update today. Again, I apologize for not being able to be there in person. see all of you soon. Thanks to Terri and everybody at the Chandler Chamber. It's been great working with them this year and in previous years. And again, I'll see everyone soon. Thank you.
Everyone. I thank the senator for his message. Questions for the senator, please give those to Terri, and she'll make sure the senator gets those. Now we have our next speaker, Representative Jermaine. Representative Jermaine represents Legislative District 18 of our state legislature. She currently serves on the Government Committee, Elections Reform Committee, and the Military and Veteran Affairs Committee. For missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and she also received a master's in public administration from ASU, and I concur with Rick, for Devils. Representative Jermaine is a co-founder of Stronger Together Arizona and We the People Summit, both of which empower individuals to strategize and to collaborate to influence public policy. Please welcome Representative Jermaine.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. I am State Representative Jennifer Jermaine from Legislative District 18. And our district actually was down to Dobson Road. So everything was Dobson Road. And then once the redistricting maps get approved, hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll go down to Alma School Road. So we're picking up more of the city of Chandler. I'm the ranking member on the Military Affairs and Public Safety Committee. And one of the big things that we are doing this year is going through the Public Safety Retirement Fund and doing a fix so that it is easier for cities to rehire retired law enforcement officers and to put them back into an active patrol area. So that is going through. It's already passed the House chamber. It is on its way to the Senate. And we're going to be working with Senator Peterson from Gilbert to make sure it gets a hearing in the Judiciary Committee. And both of my colleagues talked a little bit about the aggregate expenditure limit, but I'm going to touch on what that means for the business community. So the aggregate expenditure limit means that we're going to lose $80 million from this area. And that's $80 million pulled out of our local economy. Schools will close down. School staff, teachers, support staff, custodians, everybody will be furloughed. And because they're furloughed, they don't qualify for unemployment insurance. That is going to have a massive economic impact on the city of Chandler. And I don't know about you guys, but my neighborhood in the city of Chandler, in West Chandler, has a lot of teachers who own homes there. A lot of people are going to go into default on their mortgages. A lot of people are going to file bankruptcy. And this does not have to happen. So Representative Pollock from the other half of Chandler has introduced House Concurrent Resolution 2012, which we need to bring to the floor because that will fix this problem immediately. We have the votes to pass it. It needs to come to the floor. So please, everybody, call your representatives, call the speaker, call the president of the Senate, and ask them to bring these bills to the floor for a vote. We do not have to throw our economy into chaos. And not just for the city of Chandler. For all of our rural areas, those school districts are the major employers in those areas. This is going to have a statewide massive economic impact. And for all of you business owners, that's people who are not shopping at your businesses because they're cutting all discretionary spending. I'm sorry, as a mom, I get really worked up and mad because that means that all the parents of all the kids, 95% of kids are in public schools. All those parents are not going to be able to go to work either.
because childcare is still significantly impacted. I'm one of those parents who's had to reduce my participation in the workforce because I cannot get childcare after school. We're running a bill for our childcare industry to put some money into childcare and to give them a little bit of flexibility in their staffing. I had a bunch of childcare centers in Ahwatukee reach out and say, you know, if we could just go infant to 18 months old, we can flex our staff a little bit and be able to cover shifts when people are out sick. And then we don't have to close, which means that parents can still bring their kids and parents can still go to work. So we're running a bill for the childcare industry to try to give them a little more flexibility in some of their staffing levels. Not a lot of change, small incremental changes, so that they can keep their doors open right now. The affordable housing bill. I spoke to the sponsor of that bill last night, and he's willing to make changes to it. So I'm going to be working with City Council, working with the League of Cities and Towns, to see if we can fix that bill and make some changes to it so it doesn't have dramatic impacts on zoning and regulations in cities and towns. Because we want to make sure that we're doing things so that we can support what you guys are doing at the local level. The state should not preempting zoning laws. Working with Supervisor Sellers on the Prop 400 extension so that we can keep our roads in good repair and expand public transit. I'm working with Senator Steele and with our federal partners to expand out electric vehicle charging stations. So we just passed all of those bills to the Senate. They're going to be coming over to the House next week. And we're really, really excited to be able to spend some of the federal infrastructure money and put electric vehicle charging stations along all of our highways. We're hoping that that will also increase the amount of people who are able to purchase those vehicles because these charging stations will be more widely available. Working with Senator Messner on the fireworks bill, because as a parent of a small child, it's really difficult when fireworks are going off at 3 o'clock in the morning. It scares them. It scares pets. It scares veterans. So we want to rein that in, keep it to a reasonable hour, and allow cities the opportunity to enforce those noise restrictions. Then my big passion has been missing people. So last year we pushed through a fix for missing children. In the state of Arizona, there's no longer a waiting period for reporting a missing child. Law enforcement must immediately act. They must file that notification with all of our federal partners and with Border Patrol within 2 hours of that report coming in. Because we know when a child goes missing, minutes and hours count. And we want to safely recover them before tragedy happens. And then we're working on a separate bill for adults. We've had far too many adults over the age of 18 go missing and turn up brutally, horribly murdered. And right now, there's really nothing done when somebody files a missing person or for an adult, even if the circumstances are suspicious. So we're working on a bill that would put in some very basic things to file a report, to generate flyers, and then after 30 days, if they still have not been found and recovered, local law enforcement must reach out to federal partners and to international partners. Because this has gone on too long and we're missing too many people. So those are the things that I'm working on. And am I handing back to Erica? Thank you so much for that update. I think a lot of what you said hits so close to home, so I really appreciate that. Now we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions for either Representative Jermaine or Representative Epstein. Any questions from the audience?
No, some of the childcare centers said that, just having the flexibility of keeping infants to 18 months old in the same classroom would allow them to shift their staff around to cover the holes.
I also realized after hearing from you that the other bill I wanted to tell you about was the SRP bill, which is House Bill 2101. You've heard about what happened in Texas when the winter weather came through and electricity was not dependable and so on. And so deregulation of some electric systems has been a good experiment. Many things about it have not worked so well for consumers, for the electric companies, for anybody. And therefore, this bill would sort of pull back and fix some of Arizona's laws that would have done something, would have enabled something like Texas plan, but was never put in place. And so we're just going to pull back those laws and allow all electric utilities to operate as regulated utilities. And there's some really good ideas in this bill. We worked with them on making sure that there's a balance of power in terms of pricing, consumers, and so on. I really appreciate the fact that SRP brought it forward, and I think it will be very good for consumers. Clearly, utilities also like it, and I think that's the kind of balance we're looking for. We want to make sure that, in fact, electricity is affordable and reliable.
Yeah, thanks for ours. I work a lot with the Chandler district, but it's quite a little wonky to follow with a lot of money involved. Appropriations Committee HB 2383. From just reading, it essentially says that it's a bond building fund. So if you sell bonds, it goes to the fund. And if that has no more liabilities to it, the provision is that you go use that money to pay down the bonds, pay down the indebtedness. Okay, that's a new one. The reason I brought this up is that I'm also on the Chandler District Budget Committee, and they have $25 million left over from their budget last year, which they applied to the budget this year. They're not going to use it this year, so they're going to apply to the budget for next year. They keep rolling it over. The point is that if we have excess money in funds, that should go back to the taxpayers instead of sitting in a fund somewhere. And somebody said to me, hey, this is what government entities do all the time. They grab every penny that they can get and hang on to it because they think it's there. So trying to change the appropriations mindset of school districts in particular, but all government entities, to pay back money they're not using for taxpayers is a major change in philosophy. I just wanted to hear what you have to say about that.
Thanks. Yes, House Bill 2383 was one of the bills where the sponsor did not show up. And it was interesting because I reached out to our various business officials, the CFOs of school districts, because having been a school board member, when I read that bill, I thought, well, this bill is exactly what we do. This is what our school district does. I know as a school board member, as soon as we possible, we reduce the taxpayers' rate on bonds. So we start out at a certain rate. As we start to use the bonds, pay them back, we start bringing those rates down. That's what Terri School District does. I know this absolutely. And I checked with CFOs and the Arizona school business officials who said, yeah, that's what we do. Now, the bill tried to prescribe how it's done a little more, and everybody was on board with it. It was sort of we're already doing it. So it is a good idea. And pretty much I know school districts that I've checked in with are doing that. The idea is when you're done getting the money you need to build the building, give the money back to taxpayers. If you don't need it, absolutely yes.
Yeah, and a little nuance to that too is that also gets caught up in the aggregate expenditure limit. So that could be why they're rolling it over, because they've hit that limit and they're not allowed to expend that money. So even returning it to the taxpayers would cause them to go over the limit.
I know, but
So if
it's,
you have an override of 15%, they only need 10, they're like, oh, 10. Right, that's,
the,
they'll pull all 15. I was just in the budget committee, we do that all the time. Everything we're authorized to take, we take.
but to your point, the reason why they can't return it right now is because they hit the aggregate expenditure limit and they can't take that money out.
Yeah, I just had a question. My name's Charlotte Gonzalez. Do you know what the total percentage of budget is for K-12 education for the whole state? What percentage of our whole budget is put towards K through 12
As a,
or education?
right, as a general rule, it's focused staff. Because public education is a state responsibility. It's sort of the biggest state responsibility. So it tends to be in that 46 to 48% of the budget overall. And so it's around over $6 billion right now.
Yes, I heard it was like 54% of our entire state.
No, that's way too high.
That was, I got
I
that
wish.
information online, so.
That's not correct.
So you said 48 to what?
46 to 48%.
Of our entire budget is
For our entire
dedicated
budget.
towards K through 12 or also higher?
I would say that's mostly K-12, right?
K-12.
I would just like to thank you both. I will tell you, both our legislatures in LD 17 and 18, they are very responsive when we either text them or call their offices or respond to some things. And I know that with the aggregate spending limit, we're really kind of watching that. We have not weighed in on that. We are consulting with our school districts. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to come to an agreement crossing party lines. I'm going to continue to encourage you to do that. Because if not, then we will be weighing in very loudly quick. So I appreciate you listening on that. So thank you.
Thank you, both.
Thank you all for your interest.
Another question or? Thank you both so much. Right. Our next speaker is City of Chandler's Budget Manager, Matt Dunbar, here to speak about the proposed water, sewer, and trash rate increase. Now, there aren't very many native Arizonans, but I'm just like you, Matt. Matt is an Arizona native who was born and raised in the Prescott area. Pull that down. He has been with the City of Chandler now for close to 10 years, 7 years as a revenue and tax manager, and 2.5 years in his current role as budget manager. Before coming to Chandler, he worked in the City of Prescott for 8 years, holding the tax auditor, tax supervisor, and assistant finance director position there. He attended NAU for his undergrad degree in accounting and has a master's degree in business administration from the Keller Graduate School of Management. He also received his certification as a certified public manager through ASU. He has been involved with local government for almost 18 years in Arizona and is always eager to help educate and share his knowledge whenever possible. So with that, welcome, Matt Dunbar.
Well, good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity that we have to come before you today. Appreciate the chamber for hosting us. We have some important information we're trying to get out to as many constituents as we can. Some of you, I recognize your faces. You've been at some of our other public meetings on utilities that we've had and we will continue to have. For those of you that are business owners, we do have a more kind of targeted public meeting available Tuesday evening at 5:30. You can also attend via WebEx. So if you're interested in that, I'll give you the website information of how you can attend that meeting. This is going to be a condensed version of that meeting because we have time restrictions here, but we can spend hours on Tuesday night if you would like. So we'll have.
It's not that exciting.
It depends if you're a public works director or not. It's very exciting. So let me back up really quick. So this website, chandleraz.gov/proposed utility rates, there's a ton of information. So if you have questions that I don't answer today or we can't get to today, there's a ton of information there. The video that we're going to watch is available there. If you want to send your friends and family there, great, because there really is a plethora of information there. It's a really great resource for you. So we're going to talk briefly about what a cost of service study is, because that's kind of what the impetus is for some of these changes that we're making. We'll show a video to you that talks about all of these changes. It's really well done. If you haven't seen the videos that our Chandler video production team puts out, they do a fantastic job. In fact, for this video, they went through several actors to try to get the best talent they could. We tried first with Matt Damon. He was a no. We went to Matthew McConaughey. He was a no. Matt LeBlanc said no, so they settled with Matt Dunbar. So that's who we're going to get. We'll talk about those cost of service findings, results, and kind of how that impacts the different classifications of customers, and then what that implementation timeline is, so you're aware of that. So cost of service benefits. So cost of service, what it is. For all of our utilities, we have different classifications of customers. So we may have residential customers, multifamily customers, businesses, industrial. We have these classifications. What a cost of service does is says, instead of the revenue requirement coming in from all classes equally, it looks at what the actual costs are for each of those classifications, and are we recovering enough revenue for each class to cover their share of those costs. So it really does a very thorough analysis of all of those costs, system-wide, demand costs, the peak demand, the return flows. It takes a ton of that data and reviews it and says, okay, here's what we're charging our multifamily customers, for example. And here's the actual associated costs with multifamily. We're not recovering enough from them, but here's our single family residential. We're recovering more from them than we should. So it adjusts those rates. So as we talk about rates, you'll see that some rates are going up only slightly, and some rates are having more significant impact because we're aligning that cost of service back to equilibrium. It more accurately reflects the actual costs of providing service to those classifications, and it distributes that revenue independent of in those classifications. So it's not just a flat across the board. We did this year. We use an outside consultant for this because they look at a ton of data. They have a series of steps that they have to take, there's industry standards that they take. And we did this for water, wastewater, reclaimed water, and our solid waste as well. So this is just kind of a diagram of, every year we have a specific revenue requirement. All of our water, wastewater, reclaimed water, and solid waste funds are self-supporting. They're enterprise funds for municipalities. That means that the revenue coming in has to equal or exceed the expenditures going out. So we have to make sure that those are balanced funds. In the city of Chandler, we have a strict fund barrier, so to speak, so that our wastewater customers aren't paying for water costs or vice versa. Our water users are paying for the water costs, and our wastewater users are paying for the wastewater costs. We keep those separated. So each of those has a specific revenue requirement. So this year, for example, on the water side, we needed a 2% increase in our water revenues to meet our anticipated outflows of expenditures. So to do that, get that 2% revenue increase, the cost of service looked at how do we allocate that to these different customer classifications. Same thing on our wastewater side as well as on solid waste. And our video will talk about that. So that's next. Here we'll right on it. Dunbar, budgeting. I'm Matt Dunbar, budget manager for the city of Chandler, and I want you to know about some proposed changes that may impact your utility bill starting in July of 2022. The city of Chandler manages and operates the following utilities: water, wastewater, reclaimed water, and solid waste. The city does not operate electric and gas utilities, which are provided by SRP, APS, and Southwest Gas. From time to time, changes to utility rates are necessary to enable the city to ensure quality and safety while continuing to provide these important public services and meet the demands of a growing community. Chandler is projecting that utility revenues will need to increase to expand or refurbish existing water and wastewater facilities, fund debt service costs related to new and refurbished facilities, maintain existing infrastructure as it ages, and pay for ongoing increases to operating costs such as chemicals, electricity, and contracted services costs for solid waste collection. First, we will focus on the changes needed in our water and wastewater rates. Chandler sets water utility rates by customer classes. For example, single-family residential, multifamily residential, non-residential, landscape, and industrial. While wastewater has only 3 customer classes: residential, multifamily, and non-residential. This chart reflects the revenue increases needed by utility for fiscal year 2022 and 23. Typically, utility rate increases are implemented across the board, with each customer class increasing the same percentage based on the utility. This year, however, Chandler conducted a cost of service study to review how much it costs our water system to provide the amount of water needed on a daily basis for each customer class, and how much it costs our wastewater system to process this return. The cost of service study looked at the peak water usage requirements for each customer class and the impact on our wastewater treatment plant capacity each customer class has. All of these factors were included in determining a costing approach to more accurately reflect the actual cost of providing services to each customer class based on how they use water or impact the wastewater flows. The study showed that service demands have changed over the last few years, and some customer classes are now paying more than their share of the required costs, and others are paying less. This misalignment between customer classes is not surprising, since Chandler has continued to grow and become more automated since our last cost of service study. Therefore, instead of applying an across-the-board rate increase to generate the revenue the water and wastewater systems need, we will incorporate the cost of service study results to get each customer class back in alignment. But as we did not get out of alignment overnight, we are not going to try to adjust back to alignment overnight. Instead, the needed changes will transition over the next 5 years. The city of Chandler is proud of its reputation of having some of the lowest utility rates in the valley. Even with these planned increases, Chandler will continue to be near the bottom for total city utility bill costs when compared to other valley cities. This first chart shows the combined water, sewer, and solid waste bill for several cities. After the rate projections discussed for each utility, Chandler would still have the second lowest combined rate for both single-family and multifamily residential when compared to neighboring cities and towns. The same applies to non-residential bills for water and wastewater, as well as industrial bills. Next, we will discuss how the cost of service results in planned revenue increases will impact the average monthly bill for each customer class. This will help customers budget for their home, business, or homeowner association utility costs when the increases take effect in July of 2022. To ensure Chandler continues to provide safe, quality water systems, a 2% revenue increase is needed. Starting with the water rates for single-family residential and multifamily residential, the cost of service results show these customer classes are paying slightly more than they should, so there is a small planned increase to their water consumption rates and a small increase to the base meter charge. This is great news for our residents. Next, the non-residential customer class category, which includes a variety of business types, has been paying slightly less than they should. Because of this, the water consumption rates are projected to increase 3.79%, with a small increase to the base meter charge. The non-residential average monthly bill would increase by $37. The landscape class is for our customers who use regular potable water for irrigation. This class has also been paying less than they should. Their water consumption rate would increase 5.88%, also with a small increase to the base meter charge. Therefore, the landscape class average monthly bill would increase by $30. Finally, cost of service study results showed that the industrial customer class has also been paying less than they should. Because of this, the industrial water consumption rates are projected to increase 4.33%, with a small increase to the base meter charge. Now that we have reviewed the water bill impacts, let's move on to wastewater. Due to some large wastewater facility construction projects and related operations and maintenance, the wastewater utility requires an overall 4% increase in revenue. But the rate increases vary because the cost of service results weigh the demand each customer class is putting on the overall system. The single-family residential class does not require the full 8% increase. Therefore, their fixed rate is projected to increase by only 33 cents, or 1.21% overall. A very minimal change for our single-family residents. Next, the multifamily residential customer class, which includes apartments and duplexes, is one of the areas the cost of service study identified as not currently recovering the full cost of providing wastewater services for them. Because of this, the fixed wastewater rates are projected to increase 8.3%. Based on an average monthly bill for an apartment with 150 units, the fixed rate would increase $121.50, or 81 cents per unit. Finally, in wastewater, all other customers fall into the non-residential customer class and pay a small monthly base charge, plus a charge for either metered wastewater flow or unmetered wastewater flow using the water usage volume. The cost of service results identified non-residential as currently under recovering the full cost of providing wastewater services to them as well. This results in a projected rate increase of 6.88%. Based on an average monthly bill for a business, the total would increase $48.17. Reclaimed water was wastewater that has been treated so it can be used for a variety of purposes, including large-scale irrigation, but is not suitable for drinking. Reclaimed customers include some homeowners associations, some schools, and the city itself for parks and other landscape areas. To bring the fee in line with the cost of producing the water, the city is projecting an increase for reclaimed water of 8%. Finally, the city provides solid waste and recycling services for covered residences. To support increased operating costs, the projected revenue increase amounts to a 3.4% increase. Along with the need to increase revenues to offset increasing costs, the study also looked at some current services that were not recovering costs from an equitability point of view. The focus is on the Recycling and Solid Waste Collection Center, or RSWCC, alleyway, solid waste collections, and bulk collection services. As part of our feedback gathering, we are looking for the public's insight into some recommended changes to these services. First, at the RSWCC, the recommendation is to allow for 2 free visits to the center annually for loads no more than 400 pounds. After evaluating the data we have, this would accommodate 94% of Chandler households, while charging residents that overutilize the service. When looking at our alleyway services, we are evaluating either discontinuing the service for considerable cost savings and converting to curbside service, or charging an additional fee for those receiving alleyway services. This additional fee would offset the costs associated with the additional service level these residents receive, and would come to an additional charge on their bill of $1.61. Finally, for bulk collection, the recommendation is to limit the number of free pickups to 2 per year. This would accommodate 98% of Chandler households, according to our data. With these recommended changes and the revenue required to meet the fund's needs, the monthly increase for solid waste customers would then only be 72 cents per month. I know this is a great deal of information, but we hope it is helpful in understanding the proposed changes and projecting for future city utility budgets. Thank you for watching this presentation about our 2022 proposed utility rate changes. During the city's annual budget process in early 2022, the city will issue public notifications and conduct hearings on these proposed rate changes that will become effective July 1st, 2022. Please check chandleraz.gov/proposed utility rates for dates of the public hearings and to access more detailed information about the cost of service study and our utility rates. You can also contact city staff directly through email or by telephone. We would be happy to help answer any questions you may have on these recommended changes. Will be available for autographs after. So a couple of things I want to point out first. If the Census Bureau is interested in a way to get a better count of people, just tell them to contact me, because it just brings up alleys and you can get a very good count. There's been a lot of discussion on that. Had a lot of emails and a lot of comments regarding that. People love their alleys, and we're glad to hear that. We're glad they're working well for them. They do have some concerns and issues that we're also addressing, but get a lot of public comment on that. It's been great. So this is just kind of an overview slide that talked about what you heard in the video as far as rates. You'll see across the top, on the top one, the actual percentages that are anticipated to go up for our different classifications of customers. And this is in for proposed start date of July of 2022. So for our businesses, our non-residential, on the water side, a 3.79% increase, wastewater 6.88, and if you have a reclaimed water meter, an 8% increase there. And then we have our average monthly bill. So what that equates to for an average customer. For our non-residential, that's an increase, combined increase from about $1,100 to $1,222 is the average combined increase. Again, here's our strategy and timeline. So we've already had our work sessions with mayor and council. We held those in November and December. The PowerPoint presentations from those meetings are available online at that website. You can go and peruse through those. There's 3 different presentations that are available there. They tasked us with gathering feedback and information to bring back to them. So that's the process that we're in right now. December, February timeframe. We will still be collecting comments and feedback all throughout the process up until the point that mayor and council have approved or disapproved or made their final action. So it's not like you have to, but the first time they're going to kind of look at the packet of feedback that we've gathered is going to be that March 24th date. That's when they adopt the notice of intention to increase rates. And that kind of starts our statutorily required date and time. The first introduction of the ordinance would be on May 12th, and then the adoption of the ordinance would be May 26th if we're going to meet that effective date for July 1st. So that's our timeline. Again, that's available on the website. We also have a 5-year plan to reach that cost of service goal that we have. And so each of those anticipated needed increases is outlined there for you as well. So if you're planning out 5 years, you can see what those increases might be. Now, only the first year is the one that's going to be kind of locked in. Each year we do a financial analysis. We do a 10-year financial analysis on all of our utilities. And we look at, do we need this rate increase? And is it at the right level? So we look at that annually. Next year, I don't know what it's going to look like. We've got some significant increases from inflation this year that aren't incorporated yet. As those get incorporated, those numbers can change. So we look at those annually to make sure that we have enough revenue coming into those funds to cover our expenditures. With that.
So, Matt, you have on there that this is going to take effect July 1. You know, businesses do their budgets. I know that I've talked to one of our manufacturers that over the next 5 years, their cost of services in the water is going to go up 20%, and they're a heavier water user. That's significant. Those are jobs here in our community that are not going to be able to happen. The other thing is July 1st, you really got to take a look at that, even like your HOAs and some of those other things. The way they bill out, I would take a look at a January. That's got it. You're never going to make that happen here in July unless you're going to have raging people really upset with that significant of a change. July 1.
Great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just echo Terri. Most businesses and most HOAs are on a January, December fiscal year. So having an unplanned change in July can throw off a lot of budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's a significant amount. And the other thing is schools. How much have we sat down with our individual schools and really gone through this? And there are some things, you know, some of the waste collection and those types of things, should we, you know, reduce some of those things to twice a year? Those are probably good decisions. But there's got to be, there's a lot of red flags. And they're already, I mean, I consider that as their plans to help people like that.
First off, I want to point out we absolutely do consider that. Every time we make any kind of rate increase, it weighs heavily on our minds. We also keep in mind that we have to have enough revenue to support the needs of those facilities, because we have to maintain quality drinking water. So we can't skip on that side. We have to make sure we have enough revenues to meet those needs. One of the things that impacts this is a lot of our facilities were built out when we had the first Intel expansion in the 80s. So a lot of our facilities were built in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of those are coming up to end of useful life. So we have a lot of maintenance, replacement, and repair type items in our capital plan. We have to build up enough revenue to be able to support the debt service payments that we'll have on those facilities as they age. We have to replace. So while we do take that into consideration, we try to maintain the lowest rates possible. I think you can see that in that graph. In fact, that graph is based on our new rates compared to other valley cities. That doesn't include any proposed rate increases for other cities, but it includes ours. So, for example, Gilbert, it's going to be going up about more than 20% for the residential customers on the water side. We're going to be clearly the lowest. We take that very serious to try to maintain the lowest rates we can while providing the highest quality service that we can as well, to try to mitigate any impacts to not only our low income residents, but all residents. Yes.
Share in the 5-year plan?
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be part of one of the slides in that presentation. But they're also available right now out on our website as well.
And my only comment on the timing of July is it is during the highest use. So
Yeah.
it will be a real smack.
So a couple of quick comments. Chandler's done a great job with water, heavily involved in water where I was on council, and infrastructure costs and things like that going up. A couple of points that Terri brought up, a couple other people brought up already, is that people do plan their budgets far in advance. As a business community, we do our budgets based on a yearly thing. If we know our 5-year plan, we can plan it out. But to impact the HOAs and the business community on July 1st, when you won't even pass this till maybe May, is a major impact for things. If I remember correctly, when we did the last major increase in quite a few years now, we did delay it to allow people to plan their budgets out. But the point in July, when July's the highest bills for HOAs, for example, it won't be a small increase. It'll be a pretty large increase because of the amount of water being used. So I really appreciate if you could take a look at that, make sure. But rates go up, it's part of it, inflation. But we also have great quality drinking water and systems in our city, support a business community. So we do need to pay for that. But I think you need to plan it out. You can't just now say, okay, July 1st, boom, because people can't afford to do that and stuff. So.
Now, one of the questions we had to do with rates for seniors or those low income. We do have a program administered through Salvation Army, don't we? That also helps people with their utility bills.
We do, Mayor. That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. We have several services through our neighborhood services group that kind of get those individuals that are having struggles with their bills to the right individuals that can help pay for that. We also have our AOK program, which is donation based. People can pay an extra $1, $2 on their utility bill. That goes into that fund to help those that are less fortunate be able to pay for those utilities as well. So,
So how do we find out a little bit more?
the AOK process. Yeah. So if you get a physical bill, you can just add the $1. There's a little checkbox on your physical bill. If you don't get a physical bill, you can call our utility system office and they'll set you up on automatic payment. If you want to say add an extra $2 every month to my bill, they'll do that. They'll set it up for you. It'll just come out of your bill. It'll go over to our AOK program, which helps utilities. Anyone that has needs. It's not specific to seniors. It's anyone who has an economic need for assistance with their utility bills. Yes.
Matt, there are programs that exist under the state treasurer's office and under county treasurer's office to help go over the age of 5 with their utility bills. Can you include that information in the next one of letters?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, great information. Thank you. Yes.
The study that you did to kind of change how you were looking at these bills, is that something that every number of years you will do that study again? Or was that a one-time thing to change how you look at it? Now you just look at it different.
Yeah, so industry standards is to look at that every about 5 years, 5 or 6 years. The last time we looked at this was 2016, and we did implement a cost of service adjustment in 2017 with those rates. What happened though is there was a planned additional increase in 2019, but when we did our forecasting, we didn't need the increase, so we didn't do the increase. So cost of service wasn't fully aligned. So when it came time again to do another cost of service, we were still out of alignment. So that's why these are still kind of realigning our cost of services is because we didn't get that full cost of service implemented because we didn't do that second set of rate increases because we didn't need them. And we don't want to do rate increases if we don't need them.
So you'll do this every 5 years, you'll pay somebody to do that and look kind of, basically it's a deep dive on what you're charging and who you're charging.
Yeah, so that is the industry standard, is about every 5 years. How often we do it is going to depend. If we can get ourselves to alignment of cost of service, we may not need to do it every 5 years. Maybe we do a touch base every 7 or 8 years. It just depends on how things are adjusting. The city of Chandler isn't growing at the rate it has been over the last 30 years. We've seen significant growth. We're nearing kind of build out. So we may not have to do it as frequently, but we definitely look at what the industry standard is and when we need to do it. Right now, the industry standard is 5 years. This one, I think it took us 6 years to get to it. So it just kind of depends on where we're at. We'll take another look again, probably 5 to 6 years. Yeah.
I have two comments. One, thank you, really great presentation. On the percentage increases, it might be helpful to have a total percentage on your slide, just for understanding, adding up, and to be able to see that final, because that's really what that final bill is to all of us. The other thing was, and this was just a question, the video had mentioned that there's some wastewater infrastructure that you're going to be investing in improving. And that, could you tell me maybe who that's serving or where that is? I thought this was came out in terms of growth.
Yeah, so one of the largest that we have, John Knudsen, our public works director, could tell you much more about it. I'm going to tell you bits and pieces because from a budget perspective, I just know the number, how much it costs. But they have a wastewater plant right now that is nearing the point where they have to make some improvements because that can't fail. If a water treatment plant goes down, we don't want to have that situation. So proactively, you have to replace it. I believe it is the one off the Queen. And so right now they're looking at it's very difficult to take those out of service to repair or replace because all that extra wastewater has to go somewhere to be processed while it's out of commission. So they're looking at is that specific facility, should we just build another smaller footprint facility? It's called something flocculator. John Knudsen can tell you. But can we build one of those, which would have the same capacity and then decommission the old one? And then it would give us additional space in the future should we need to expand wastewater services. So they're looking at that right now. That's a pretty big price tag. It's about $100 million project. Either way we do, if we just refurbish what's there, it's about $100 million. We put a new plant in, it's about $100 million. So they're looking at pros and cons of each of those. But that's a big expense, and we have to make sure that we have enough revenue coming in to afford the debt service on that. We're not going to cash fund it. We do have a significant portion of cash funding that we're going to do because we're very careful with our debt here at the city of Chandler. But we're going to have some debt on top of that. We need to make sure that debt service payments can be made. So that's why that rate for wastewater is a little bit higher than the water side because we have some of these projects.
In terms of what we're working on,
Yeah, so all of those agreements are in our financial plans. We have water agreements, we have reclaimed water agreements with the Gila River Indian community. We also have a large capital project that's going on for the Roosevelt Dam expansion. So we're participating in that, which will give us additional water capacity in that area. So all of those costs in that capital plan, we do a capital plan for 10 years. And actually on the water side, we cheat a little bit. We do about an 11 or 12-year plan because we really don't want some of those high dollar things to sneak up on us. But those are all built into that financial plan to make sure we can cover those costs.
Do you have an idea of how much you did it, how sustainable for 5 years, and is it made up more one-time funding versus
Great question. So I think right now it's funded pretty well. We've had a lot of federal dollars that have been able to, the city of Chandler, when we received our ARPA, as well as AZ CARES dollars, we've been able to allocate a lot of that to help those that would be disadvantaged because of the COVID pandemic. So the funding levels right now are very good. Those are all one-time dollar funding. After that is done and goes away, we're back to kind of our ongoing revenues. Ongoing revenues they're never as sufficient as we would like them to be. But through as much dialogue as we can get out to people to let them know about the programs and ways to donate to those programs, we can increase those ongoing contributions. That's the best we can do. But I think right now, from a one-time perspective, got enough to meet the needs that we've currently been seeing come in, and for the foreseeable future, the next probably 3 years. And then after that point, we're back kind of down to our ongoing revenues, which we'd like to see increase over the next 3 years.
Yeah, so because we are a business organization, and I get that. So companies that are going to be high volume users are semiconductor companies. Those are the ones who are creating jobs here in our community, and that's why all these other ancillary businesses are here. Hotels. We've got senior, like nursing homes and that are high volume users. Those are going to be affected. Our HOAs, and I know we're putting these programs for seniors with fixed incomes, but our HOAs, most of them do live in HOAs, or many of them do. The HOAs are going to have to recover that somehow. So then we're giving money out to those who need it, but then we're charging HOAs more. I mean, this is a cycle, and I would really like you, and I'm disappointed. I'm sorry that the mayor and vice mayor had to leave, but I really think you need to take a look at this and maybe, because these are significant increases. Our breweries are high water users. Our dentists are high water users.
Got my attention. I gotta pay more for a beer, Matt. You're in trouble, dude.
Again, my email is up there. I'll tell the census how to get there.
I want this one to understand. And how we get there. And again, I am not saying we need that infrastructure in our how we stand. I am personally very invested in making sure that we have that quality. I have a grandson who was born that had effects of lead from Flint, Michigan. I get it. This is really important. We don't want to be that. So, but this just seems like it's so large. And I understand that we have to get there at some point. I would just really like you to take a look at some of that.
Yeah, and I appreciate your
Especially our
comments.
restaurants, in that they've been hit so hard over the last 2 years. And if you're looking at an 8% increase on some of that, actually 20% over the next 5 years, that's significant.
Yeah, so we appreciate that. And like you said, we do have to, we have a balance of keeping our rates low, but not too low that we're impacting the actual infrastructure that's serving the business community. Last thing a business wants to do is to roll into their restaurant in the morning and not have water service because of a main break.
Yeah.
And now we're closed and they can't make any sales. So, our intent or our purpose is to make sure that those services are available on tap, unintended, anytime that they need to, for their businesses. It does cost money, and in today's environment, with a lot of the chemical and electrical costs that we have, you'd be surprised to see our electric bill out of the pumping plants. It's significant. So we do have to recoup some of those costs. We know it's going to impact our businesses. We take that into consideration, and we absolutely I'll take that feedback back to mayor and council. Let them know that we want to make sure that we're doing a deep dive, fully understand, because it will impact our businesses and our residents.
And Matt, one of the things you have to be careful about is the fact that percentages are that funny. If you raise something from $1 to $2, it's a 100% increase. It depends how you do the math. So you need to, I think Jane brought up a really good point. You need to show the total number. So what will different users, I remember we did this before, showing the average user is great, but it doesn't show the real number. So if you've got a Santan brewery, you have an Intel, you have larger organizations, you need to show that so people are very aware. It's not just a $3 increase for the average homeowner. A business might be affected by $30 a month or $1,000 a month, whatever it might be. So don't try and hide the numbers and make them look great for just one class. Really show what it affects. But again, percentages are really funny. They can, it's a stats guy and you can make, numbers dance on the head of a pin if you want to. So really show it and don't hide it at all. So people are really aware what each cost are, because 20% sounds scary, you're $1 billion business, 20% sounds like a lot, but how much of that business is going to be affected by that?
Just a quick question, you might have already answered this, so I apologize if it's a different question. My question is the money, is it increased for capital improvements, or are we losing money right now? Is this mostly earmarked to capital improvements, like you hear you say, we need to make sure these things are working, we need to replace this, is that pretty much what it's for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It is a combination. I would say of these rate increases that we're looking at, probably 60 to 70% is related to the capital plan that we have in place. The other is related to our operating costs, which keep going up. As many of you know, the labor market right now is also very tight. Not only is it tight for businesses, it's tight for the city of Chandler. And so making sure that we're paying the employees that operate those plants enough to get assistant people in the door has been a challenge as well. So those are part of our operating costs. We're having to increase those. Also, our utility bills and chemicals is a big one. If anyone that has a pool this last year knew, it was hard to find chlorine, and chlorine is a big component of what we do over there, some of our processes. So all those chemicals going up, all those things are on the operating side, but that's probably 30 to 40%. The rest is on the capital side to make sure that those operating facilities are functioning.
You guys are looking at basically building a brand new plant and scrapping the old one. The cost of steel has gone up dramatically. The cost of concrete has gone up dramatically. And the cost to get the land repaired has gone up dramatically. So $100 million for a plant of that size is actually a very reasonable estimate. When you look at everything that goes into that, and full disclosure, my husband does this for a living, building Gilbert's plant right now. So I know how much Gilbert is paying, and Gilbert's paying a lot more than Chandler's paying.
That's one of the reasons their rates are going up so much. They also haven't done rate increases, on a kind of consistent basis. Last time they did a residential rate increase was many years ago, and so it's causing kind of a one-time spike. And I think that's one thing that Chandler has done a great job of, is looking kind of gradually, making it so that the percent increases are a little bit more tolerable, because you're gradually getting there instead of saying, okay, now it's going to be a 25% shock to your water bill, instead of say 4% or 5%, depending on which classification you're in. And while those are still significant numbers, we're doing everything we can to try to make sure that we're mitigating those impacts from this.
Another comment. I learned this when I was on council. The city pays for water too. So Parks and Rec pays the city. So when that rate goes up, it also affects parks programs and things like that. I know they take a real hard look at everything. It was something I didn't even think about when I, was on the council, but it does affect everything. The city hall bills will go up, utility bills. So it does affect everything. I know they don't take a look, and I will commend our finance guys, Nat and Don, are really sharp in terms of what they're going to do. So I know they'll scrutinize everything for us to make sure we're getting the best done. So July 1 is that's a crucial thing.
Duly noted, and the mayor was here for that discussion as well.
He left when it started.
All right, and I'll be available afterwards as well if there's additional questions. But again, that website is a great place to go for a ton of information, the videos there, the actual reports. If you're interested in a 170-page report on the water wastewater side, that's there. You can have a reading pleasure, read it to the kids at night, but right to sleep. Appreciate it.
Matt, do you have a calculator on and I'm wondering if there's like a calculator formula so that if I put in that I use X amount of water, what that's going to be, and as an industrial, this is what I use. That might be helpful, because I think some people are not knowing. It's that not knowing fear until you get that bill.
Right, we will. So we asked our IT team to build a calculator on our website where you can put in the actual your usage, and we calculate your old and your new. They're working on it. My hope is that by this week we'll have it. Friday. So by next week we'll have it available. Maybe today they'll get back to me. I'm not sure on that, but we do hope to have a calculator out there to make that real easy. The other thing you can do is all of our customer service representatives have a similar Excel spreadsheet that's very easy to do, and so they have that calculator already built in. So any customer average bill or any month they want to look at, here's what that month would be in the new rate. So we do have that through our customer service call center, going online soon, but that'll help them at least budget out and kind of see what their actual impact will be, not just the average.
Honestly, any company that inside does this themselves anyway. And it's just like this now, which you can do an Excel spreadsheet yourself.
Yeah, but many of them aren't
The
able to
little
where
companies,
expenditures are baked into the budget, so not necessarily, so you wouldn't have had those people necessarily. in there.
Can't hurt. Yeah.
Cost for reliability for the large industrials. Will any of your concerns for the infrastructure be shared based on your reliability or failure rates or anything like that help justify?
It's not planned now. If you would like us to, John would be happy to share some of that information. So I can get with him and tell him, hey, we're gonna have a question on that. If you could address that, we'll add a slide in there, to address that specifically. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. This is really important.
A lot of number crunching. Thank you, Matt. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and have our fearless leader, Terri Kimball, President and CEO of the Chamber, come and give her update.
Thank you. Make this brief.
Because there is a lot going on. Obviously, we're watching things that are happening at the city level. Couple of things. Obviously, the city budget. We're really taking a look at that in the CIP budget. I think there's what 289 pages or something in that capital improvement plan budget. So we're taking a look at where those expenditures are going. Again, there are some things because city, the budget process is very complicated. And so we're really trying to even dive through that as well. We are also watching at the city level on the diversity, equity, and inclusion. That has been a focus point for many of you in the room. So we're monitoring what that looks like. At the state level, there were 1,431 bills, Representative Jermaine, so thank you, that have been dropped, along with resolutions and memorials, brings the total to 1,546. Just to put that in perspective where we're at, last year total for the entire legislative session, there were about 1,800 bills. And we are anticipated that this will be far surpass that, and it will be the largest number of bills that have been dropped in our legislature in history. So with that, yes. That's what I'm saying. There's still one more week to drop bills. So we are really monitoring that. Many of the things that the representatives and senator talked about on what they're monitoring, Prop 400 is a big one, especially for Chandler as we continue with our infrastructure and with the amount of manufacturers and so forth that we have here. That's going to be critical. And when we talk about like the I-10 expansion and transportation, and I'm sorry that Ryan Peters had to leave, we are going to have one whole public policy session just on transportation because there are some major things happening. As well as you're thinking, well, how does that affect? It's not just our roads and so forth. It's about commuting workers here. It's about getting workforce from the west side of town to here. And that's very, very critical. So we're really keeping an eye on that. Some of the other things at the federal level, obviously we passed the transportation bill. We are monitoring what's happening with that, making sure that Chandler, as well as the state of Arizona, gets their fair share on dollars. We're also monitoring, there's a bill that will help for our chip manufacturers, and that we are working with our federal delegation on watching what's happening there. One of the other things that just has cropped up, there was a bill at the federal level that we're monitoring on for schools ending Common Core standards. And we know here in Chandler that education is a top priority. That's why we are attracting companies. That's why the city is, education is probably one of the top economic development tools for us here. So we're really kind of watching that. The other thing that we're really watching is there are we signed on to a letter yesterday encouraging President Biden to take a look at those H1 and H2 on the visa component with the immigration. Because many of our manufacturers and our companies here in Chandler are global, and that visa program that is really, really important. When you talk about immigration, it's not just about the undocumented workers, it's also about skilled workers and how do we continue to be that top-notch excellence, community of excellence. So those are some of the things, like I said, we have weighed in on, I think, only 19 bills so far that we've actually taken a stand on. We're monitoring out of that almost 1,400 plus, we are monitoring about 124 bills on a daily basis. So as they go through committees at our state level. So if there are issues or bills that are pertaining to your individual company, please let us know so that we can take a look at that or we'll have an effect on it. Questions on what's happening at the local, state, or federal level? Gosh, you're a quiet group. You guys are still stunned over the water and the wastewater, right? Matt, you got the Academy Award for that. So, all right, I'm going to turn it back over to our board chair.
Lots of stuff going on in the chamber. You all should have a flyer that has all of it next month. I also want to thank again to our presenters. You did a great job. Never knew a finance guy could have comedy out, so very unusual. Anyway, appreciate what you did, and Representative Jermaine as well. Any further questions for you, Director of the Chamber team? Thank you to our elected officials that were here today. Thank you again for our sponsors, Air Products and Chemicals, Flow River Project, Finance Startup, Dignity Health Chandler Regional Medical Center, Intel, Catalyst Computer Technologies, Southwest Gas Company, Edward Jones Investment, APS, Dragon Walk, Fine Chinese Restaurant. So be on the lookout for further emails and things going on, future public policy, and thank you everybody for coming.